Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and this is episode 48. I believe this is going to be chapter 6 of the book, and the title is Waiting for a Train. That means today I actually kind of previewed this episode to a friend in the sauna yesterday, and he laughed out loud. Drawing connections between the character Cobb. I don't even know if we know his first name in the movie Inception, but it's Leonardo DiCaprio's character, the main character. And we're going to draw comparisons to the Sopranos and Tony Soprano. And you might be thinking, how on earth are you going to do that? And I'm about to tell you. So this week, this chapter is kind of about intuition, kind of on the more esoteric side of life. Like, obviously, we live in a world made up of atoms, which form structures, inanimate, organic, inorganic, things that are living, things that are not, they just exist. And we interact with the world. And it's easy to get fixated on this external world due to just the sheer depth and terrifying nature of the inner world. I think nowadays, because our external world is so enticing and so kind of ideal, there's a lot of ways that we can escape our internal world. I think that's where a lot of mental health issues arise. So I know for myself, I was very kind of stuck chasing hedonistic things or anything that occupied my mind to the point where I didn't have to interact with reality and just bear the terrible weight of it. The thing about reality is it will wait for you until you're ready to bear it. And you can avoid it your whole life, but you get to the end of your life and realize you didn't live it. And bearing the burden of reality is one of the most liberating things you can do. But it is terrifying and feels pretty bad when you're going through it. So resisting it, though, is where I think a lot of mental illness comes from. And when I realized that reality's here, rent's due, landlord's knocking on the door, open the door, pay the man, he goes away. And every now and then the man will come back and you have to pay the man to make him go away. But if you do, the more regularly you do, I found you can even kind of preempt. If you know things that trigger you, give you anxiety, make you panic, these are chemical reactions in your body. And that's where you can use the mind to influence the body and the body to influence the mind. And if you have tools, things like breathing, like yoga, even just mindfulness practices, a totem, so to speak, that's where we get into Inception. So if you don't know anything about the movie, basically these people are launching themselves using drugs into deep dreaming states. In these dream states, they can oftentimes create and shape the world. They can stay down there for years, especially in the lower levels of the dreams. And it's only minutes in real life. So this is obviously attractive because you can go internally into the dream world and you're in control. Whereas obviously in our external world and reality, we're not entirely in control. Other people have control of their peace. And honestly, the world, Mother Nature, is genuinely mostly in control. So we're at the mercy of a lot of things, but when you dream, when you imagine, when you go internal, that's where you have control. And so that's why I found it so valuable to go inside, because again, I do have control, and that's what we want. We try to exert our control on the external world, but that's not possible. And we might succeed at it in the short term, and it might give us a overinflated sense of self or ego that makes you think that you can control more than you can. But in reality, that's a finite game. A lot of it is luck. A lot of it is people just happen to want the same thing you do, which is important. You have to invite those connections and work in the external world and find synergies and work together with people. But you can't expect it. You can't rely on it all the time. These are things that are going to happen by the grace of the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. So instead of being frustrated with that, if you're feeling out of control, easiest way to get back in control is just control what you can control. Go inside, meditate, go to sleep, set an intention before you sleep, and try to dream. And this can give you a sense of safety, a sense of purpose, enough so that when challenges arise in life and you don't get your way, or you're not able to influence a situation the way you may have wanted to, you can still have just a little piece to yourself, and never giving over your control of what you can control. Because oftentimes there's a tug of war going on between responsibility and control. And so to be able to control outcomes or influence them, you have to take responsibility for your part. So a lot of times people give away their control and their responsibility because they just don't want to deal with it. But when we do that, give that to other people, those people have power over you, and maybe they don't have your best interest at heart. That can be very dangerous very quick. And so you always have to build yourself in a way that you can handle the responsibility of your life. And then build morality so that you can, if other people want to have you direct, maybe influence or take some responsibility for them, that you could lead them, and you could be trusted to do so in a moral way that benefits everyone. So I say all that to get back to Inception. So Inception, when they're in the dream world, sometimes it could be hard to tell what's real. If you've been there long enough, you start to believe the dream world is real. So this is the kind of the side plot of the movie. All of the drama, everything that's going on is really kind of secondary to, it's a good story, but it's secondary to the fight of the main character, Cobb, and basically what happened to his wife. So he and his wife went to the deepest state of the dream world. They grew old together in the dream world. They forgot that it wasn't real. He ultimately remembered and said, hey, we got to go back to real world, back to our kids. This was great. We have to let it go. And basically his wife couldn't let it go. She thought that world was real. So the whole point of the movie, Inception, is in the dream world to influence someone's mind. So plant an idea that then would grow into their subconscious brain in the real world. And he suggested to her that the dream world isn't real. But what happened when you try to influence other people in that way, in that intimate way, she began to realize or think that the real world wasn't real. And that gets you to a really dangerous spot. So what she ended up doing was testing that reality and ultimately committing suicide based on the idea that he gave her to get her out of the dream world. So this can be, like I said, very dangerous. And obviously the drugged dream world is not something that's necessarily real. I guess it could be, but it's like top secret CIA shit. We certainly don't have access to it like normal people. But he altruistically tried to help, and in the end ended up hurting her. And what he could have done instead was just lovingly and patiently try to get her to come back to the real world. And honestly, letting a person work through their illusions on their own is going to always be the best outcome. It's going to be the thing that sticks the most. Trying to influence people results oftentimes in unintended consequences. So they obviously got back to the real world, but then he lost her. Anyways, like in either case, he lost her. Like he lost her in the dream world, he lost her in the real world. And sometimes the truth just is that you lose the person. And facing that, stomaching that, it's really tough. So the whole movie is about a different plot, but this is really the movie. At the end, he has to go back to the depths of the dream world where his projection of her is, and basically said like, hey, I've been holding on to you, but you're just a projection. You're not nearly as perfect as my wife. And she's gone. And like, I felt guilty about it, but it's really not my fault. I just tried to do the best I could, and I failed, but I gotta let you go. And then the end of the movie is him getting back to his kids, who, because of his wife's suicide, she left a suicide note basically saying that he killed her, so he was wanted for the murder of his wife. And in a way, that's kind of true. Like we said, he planted that idea in her head, and then she committed suicide. So in a weird shade of gray, you could say that was true. But at the end, he gets back to his kids, and then he's able to, ideally, hopefully, move forward with those kids. Now, the thing I love at the end of this movie, I talk about a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, but they spin a top at the end, and the top doesn't fall over. It wobbles a little bit, and you can imagine that it does fall over, but you don't know for sure. So the totem, to bring it back to the totem that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the totem was his wife's way, the top. She would spin the top, and in the dream world, she could make it so that it would never fall. So that's how she would know, okay, this top's not falling, I'm dreaming. And at a certain point, she chose to forget that because she liked the dream world so much. So at the end of the movie, he spins the top, walks away towards his kids, and you never see it fall. So we don't know if it's a dream or if it's real. The whole thing could have been a dream within a dream of a dream of trying to get him to let his wife go. So that's kind of the meta nature of the movie. But I love the idea of a totem because, like I was saying earlier, you do need to explore your inner world for proper mental health. Exploring who you are, what you're made of, what you believe in, testing those assumptions in your mind and in the real world. But when you conceive of an idea, you test it in the real world, you have to have a totem. And this could be people, places, or things. Obviously, a top is not going to tell you if being a lawyer is the best thing for you. But this is where intuition comes in. So for me, when I was young, I had a chiropractor that was super cool, and that gave me a good feeling in my gut. I just had a good intuition, like, hey, that's a cool profession. And in terms of all the professions I knew of, it ranked pretty highly in terms of things that I would potentially do. But I just never it's something about adjusting that was pretty terrifying to me. And now that I know more about it, I feel very comfortable, and I know I'm going to be very good at it as I progress through school and into my career. But I kind of avoided that destiny in a way, but I always had that good gut feeling. And eventually, I went inside myself. The world kind of tells you, like, I think going to Harvard and playing football was something that people kind of said I should do because I had the opportunity, like do it for the people who can't, who don't have the opportunity. But I can't tell you I ever had a good gut feeling about it. And so this is where intuition is tricky, because I do think playing football at Harvard was a incredible challenge and ultimately was good for me in hindsight, like now that I see more of the total picture and where my career is going and what I'm going to be doing. But I was scared to death. So if the intuition's kind of clouded by fear, then that can be pretty tough. Like that's kind of a bad signal or a incomplete intuition. And then developing your intuition will help you to understand when fear is clouding it. This is almost like a Jedi thing. This is Yoda and Anakin kind of thing, to bring in another movie. But talking about not letting fear cloud your vision of the future. But if you told me back then, hey, you're going to get concussions, you're going to recover from them, you're going to go be a chiropractor and help other people with concussions and all kinds of other issues with their nervous system, and you'll have the energy and obsession to understand the body in a new way because of what you went through, hands down, I sign up. My intuition's all in, no fear. And I'm just like, okay, I got to wait this X amount of time, and I'm going to get to, when you know the outcome, it'll be a little bit easier. So it's trusting your intuition. And obviously I went to Harvard and played football, even though I was terrified. And there was something about the city of Boston and just the feel of the campus. Like, I felt my intuition about that and just knew it was right. And then, again, everything that happened to me shaped exactly who I am now. So it can be really tough. I can tell you, I've made many hard choices since then, and every single one has led me exactly where I am. And I'm at a point now where I trust my intuition more than I ever have. I trust my ability to discern fear when it clouds my judgment. And I'm committed to continue to sharpen that spear, that intuition, to really understand what's best for me. So yeah, more often than not, I've trusted it and made more good decisions than bad. I want to continue making good decisions. But the last word on the totem is, so you may not have like a top that you can spin that tells you like, hey, this is the right move. You can't flip a coin and heads is this is right. But you can notice how the people in your environment react to you. If you're doing what you're meant to be doing, and it's a good gut feeling for you and people are reacting positively, it's not going to be everyone reacting positively, but it's certain people that you respect and admire will support you, and you find more it's like greasing the groove. Like your progress is easy. It comes with ease. Not necessarily that it's easy. It might be hard work, but it comes with ease because you're just where you're supposed to be and it just feels right. That's a feeling that you have to chase. And if you're feeling a lot of friction, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but it means that maybe an aspect of what you're doing is wrong. Maybe it's not time yet. Maybe it's a different, like maybe you're a salesperson, but you need to be selling a different product. Like there's all kinds of different iterations you can, so you have to check yourself inside in your inner world and really connect with what you want to be doing. And then you just have to test, be willing to fail in the outer world and use people, places, and things as feedback. If you're shooting a gun and you're not hitting the target, that's pretty immediate feedback. But obviously feedback from people, especially in today's world with how complicated it is, it's hard to discern. So the only thing we can do is practice. And that's why, like, in the medicine or chiropractic, anything like that, the business is called a practice, because patients come in, we know a lot, but each patient also teaches us something that we can learn to use on future patients. So practice, practice, practice. And the episode title, Waiting for a Train, last thing on Inception, we're going to get to Sopranos and get the fuck out of here. That was part of an incantation that Cobb and his wife would use when they were coming back to reality from the dream world. They'd say, you're waiting for a train and like all this other stuff. And at the end, like, it doesn't matter because you'll be together. And it's kind of like taking a leap of faith. And this chapter might end up being called Leap of Faith at the end of it. But we'll see. It's still a rough draft, so there's time to change it. But it's also like, again, I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, if you kind of don't interact with reality, you stay too much in your inner world, or you interact with reality too much and you never go inside, you're basically waiting for a train. If you're not riding back and forth between yourself and reality, you're going to be waiting forever, waiting for life. Like, life happens in that balance, in that kind of shift between polar opposites. I mean, there's a reason the sun goes up and it goes down. When the sun goes down, it's dark out. We retract, we come in. It's like winter, come in, reevaluate. Summer, you get out, it's hot, energy is flowing, and you interact with people. And so that can be on a daily basis, a weekly basis. Maybe during the week, you stay in at night, you get rest. On the weekend, you go out, you interact with people. That's why a 5-day work week is not ultimately balanced. 5 to 2 is not really balanced. It should be 4 to 3 or 3 to 4. That's a topic for another day, but can't spend your whole life waiting for that train. You got to just go for it. You got to interact. You got to come in, do the work, go out, do the work. And it's exhausting. And that brings us to Tony Soprano. I've never seen a man look more exhausted. And as he should. He's the head of a mafia crime family. But the reason people love Sopranos is it takes a guy who you think of as primitive, it's a killer and like despotic, tyrant, all these things. But he is constantly questioning himself. And it really shows the depth of men. The hidden depth, the kind of the untapped depth that men typically, again, like interact in the outer world, don't really go in. And I think traditionally in the past, men have been forced to go out and do the work because they were bigger, stronger, faster than women. Testosterone is great for work, just turning your brain off and working. The women would stay home and they would kind of have more rich inner world, more creative, preparing food, raising children. And nowadays, we have the abundance and ability that everyone can kind of explore these different roles. And you see that in The Sopranos. Tony starts to think like, hey, my relationship with my mom wasn't so great. I wish I could have that feminine love. In a way, when you don't get it, you end up trying to give it to yourself. So he's trying to give himself compassion. But he's got all these compartments inside of him. He's got a killer. He's got a boss. He's got a father. He's got a brother. He's got son. All these different roles. that he plays, and cousin, uncle, and you see him interacting with all these people. You see all these people going through all their trials and tribulations, and he's trying to figure out who he can trust. And he feels like he can't trust anyone, so he has a mistress, even though he loves his wife. And you see, like, all the love is very genuine, but at the core of him, he's just very terrified and doesn't know who to trust. Doesn't trust his reality, doesn't trust himself. And it's interesting because he has these panic attacks that force him to seek answers, and he goes to a psychiatrist or psychologist who he has an interesting relationship with also. Just adds to the show a little bit more. But you just watch him go through all the ups and downs, and the fact that it's an illegal mob boss perspective just makes it all the more interesting. And so this guy who you would think of as kind of untouchable or whatever it may be, he's very sensitive. And I think it shows, like, we don't know what's going on in someone's inner world or even their external world that they're hiding. And that perspective that they brought in that show was just incredible. And again, you know, his whole life he's kind of playing the external game and ignoring the internal. And you ignore the internal, you know, you get sick. Your body gets physically sick. You get ill. You have panic attacks. You have different problems. So that's a sign that you have to slow down and go inward. And I think it's cool that nature does that for us. But obviously being sick is not fun. And that's why my life's work is going to be to help people understand how to balance the inner and external world and try to find as much peace as we can find on this earth while we're here. I do think Tony Soprano could use a good adjustment. And maybe less gabagool, a little bit more kefir or kombucha or something, just to help the stomach, the bugs, the healthy bacteria in the gut. And yeah, I felt like he has always had something going on in terms of partying too much or backaches, throwing his back out or whatever. And you see it all the times when people always have stuff going on. They get sick, whatever it is. And human beings are a dynamic thing. That's another thing the show shows, is even the mob boss has highs and lows, up and downs. But once again, if you develop the tools to ride those highs and lows with grace and just learn to feel joy even when you're down, or get yourself back to a place where you can feel joy, I can't stress enough like how much this has helped me and how much I look forward to continuing to develop this in myself and how much it's worth it. So again, this is going to be chapter 6 of my book. I'm very excited to elaborate more on maybe tips and tricks of how to develop intuition and how to connect your inside and outside worlds to form a version of reality that's as close to our real reality as possible. Because at the end of the day, that's what helps you most, is if you live by the laws of nature and laws of reality and try to shape it with the power that we do have, that we genuinely do have, understanding our power and how we can shape the world, then that becomes harmony. We don't try to take too much from the world, or we don't shrink away and wait for that train. You got to interact with life and keep yourself in balance. Find that harmony. So with that, we're almost at 30 minutes. That's one of the longer podcasts I've done, especially recently. A lot to say on this topic. Very excited to write that chapter. So until next time, I challenge you to get feedback from people, places, or things. Go shooting. Look how close you are to the target. Go hang out with someone. Tell them a business idea you have and tell them to rip it to shreds, just to really battle test it. So yeah, get after it, and I will see y'all next time.